quiet. Listen closely to these words, for they may determine how you can avoid the fate that has already befallen many. What you are about to hear will change your perception of battles, of how one side seemingly doomed managed not only to withstand but also to turn the situation to its advantage. Have you ever felt trapped, cornered, when it seems like everything is going wrong and the enemy knows your every move? This is about me, this is about you. This is about everyone who has ever found themselves in such a situation. But I found a way out, and today I will share that knowledge. On November 7th, 1943, just after midnight, in Assiniboia Bay, on Bougainville Island, Japanese destroyers silently cut through the dark waters. Aboard them were nearly 500 soldiers of the 53rd Infantry Regiment, heading towards what their command believed to be the greatest American weakness. The plan was classic: stealthily infiltrate behind enemy lines while the Marines slept, establish a beachhead, and crush the American shore defenses in a devastating pincer attack. Every step was calculated, every maneuver meticulously rehearsed. Major James Wilson received a radio message at his command post. Enemy forces had landed behind their positions. Everything in Japanese doctrine suggested this should work. Surprise, darkness, superior forces attacking from an unexpected direction. The Marines were expected to panic, break, and be trapped between two forces with no possibility of retreat. But as the first Japanese soldiers advanced deeper into the dense jungle, they had no idea they were walking into the most perfectly organized killing field in Marine Corps history. The Americans were not trapped at all. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. The radio crackled to life at Major James Wilson's command post at 00:15 on November 8th. The voice on the other end was steady but urgent. Enemy barges had been spotted landing 3 miles behind the main marine perimeter, near Coromokina Lagoon. Wilson set aside his coffee and carefully studied the tactical map spread out on his field table. Red pins marked the forward positions of the 3rd and 9th Marine Regiments. Blue arrows indicated the expected Japanese approach routes. And now he drew a new symbol behind his own lines. 500 Japanese soldiers from the 53rd and 54th Infantry Regiments of the 17th Division executed what their commanders considered a masterful flanking maneuver. While Marine attention was focused on jungle approaches from the north and east, destroyers slipped through the darkness and landed nearly half a battalion behind Marine lines. The plan followed classic military doctrine. Establish a blocking position behind enemy lines, then attack from multiple directions to create confusion and undermine morale. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph McCaffrey burst into the tent, his uniform still bearing traces of the red clay that covered everything on Bougainville. "Major," he said, "we have confirmation from the 12th Marine Regiment. Artillery observers are counting at least 12 barges, possibly 15. They're offloading quickly." Wilson nodded, already calculating response times and fire missions. The Japanese had chosen their landing site well, a stretch of beach protected by coral reefs, which made approach difficult for larger vessels, but was ideal for the shallow draft barges they preferred for such operations. What the Japanese didn't know was that marine doctrine had evolved significantly from the static defenses they expected to encounter. The 3rd Marine Division had spent months perfecting integrated fire support systems that could respond to threats from any direction within minutes. While Japanese planning assumed it would take Americans hours to redeploy artillery and coordinate a response, the Marines had already rehearsed scenarios just like this. Sergeant Herbert Thomas was checking his squad's positions along the inner perimeter when the first artillery shells began to fall on the beach. The 12th Marine Regiment opened fire with its 75 mm howitzers, shelling the landing zone with devastating accuracy. Through his binoculars, Thomas could see Japanese soldiers scrambling from the barges, some diving into the surf, others running for the tree line. The 90mm coastal guns of the 3rd Defense Battalion joined the bombardment, their heavier shells cratering the beach and setting 2 barges ablaze. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. The Japanese expected to achieve tactical surprise, but their own intelligence had completely failed them. Marine listening posts had tracked the destroyer movement for over an hour, and shore observers had spotted the barges long before they reached the beach. By the time the first Japanese soldier stepped onto the sand, pre-planned artillery concentrations were already falling on pre-designated target zones. What was intended to be a coordinated assault devolved into a desperate struggle for survival under a hail of fire. Captain Isamu Akamatsu led the first wave of Japanese infantry inland, his men moving in small groups through the dense jungle vegetation. They had trained for months in night operations and jungle warfare, confident in their ability to outmaneuver the Americans in rugged terrain. But as they pushed deeper toward their objectives, they began to encounter something unexpected. Marine positions that seemed to know exactly where they were coming from, machine gun nests positioned to cover likely approach routes, artillery observers with direct lines to gun batteries, and flares that illuminated entire sections of the jungle at precisely the most inopportune moments. Private First Class Robert Carter manned an M19-19, .30 caliber machine gun when the first Japanese patrol stumbled into his field of fire. The Marines had established interlocking fields of fire that created kill zones at every natural choke point between the beach and their main positions. Carter's machine gun position, dug in behind a fallen log and camouflaged with jungle vegetation, commanded a narrow trail that Japanese scouts had identified as their primary infiltration route. When the lead elements appeared in his sights, Carter held his fire until the entire patrol was within the kill zone, then opened up with controlled bursts that mowed down the front rank and scattered the survivors. The Japanese assault began to unravel within the first hour. Units that were supposed to advance in coordination found themselves pinned down by accurate machine gun fire or broken up by artillery concentrations that seemed to anticipate their every move. Radio communication between Japanese elements became sporadic as American jammers interfered with their frequencies. While American coordination remained flawless thanks to superior communications equipment and established protocols, Wilson tracked the battle from his command post, receiving constant updates from forward observers and artillery spotters. Have you ever felt that, despite all your efforts and meticulous planning, reality challenges you, breaking familiar patterns and forcing you to rethink everything you've learned? That feeling when it seems the enemy anticipates your every move and your time-tested tactics suddenly prove useless. How can you win when everything goes awry and the opponent acts as if they're reading your mind. Today, we'll tell you a story that demonstrates how outdated notions of warfare were crushed by a new, revolutionary strategy that changed the course of battle. You'll see how even the most carefully planned attack can turn into a disaster if the enemy has mastered the art of adaptation and coordination, turning your weaknesses into their strengths. In this video, we will reveal 3 key aspects that allowed the American Marines to turn a seemingly hopeless situation into a decisive victory. And here is the first. The Japanese attack unfolded exactly as Marine defensive doctrine predicted. The chaos of night darkness, units separated by difficult terrain, casualties among commanders who tried to maintain control by exposing themselves to danger. The Americans turned the enemy's attempt to surprise them into their own advantage. Using superior firepower and seamless communication, they systematically destroyed the landing forces. Sergeant Thomas led his squad in a counterattack that would later earn him the Medal of Honor. Moving through terrain illuminated by flares and automatic weapon fire, he coordinated with adjacent units to encircle the remaining Japanese positions. His coolness under fire became legendary among the Marines who fought with him that night. When a Japanese grenade fragment pierced his left arm, Thomas continued to direct fire from an exposed position, refusing medical aid until the immediate threat was neutralized. By Oro 4-hour Vau, the Japanese rear attack had completely collapsed. What began as a meticulously planned flanking maneuver turned into a one-sided slaughter. The landing forces, intended to trap the Marines in a pincer movement, found themselves caught in a trap, squeezed between the beach where they landed and Marine positions that formed an impenetrable barrier. Artillery continued to shell escape routes, while Marine infantry methodically eliminated scattered survivors. The night that was supposed to break American morale instead demonstrated the overwhelming superiority of the Marine Corps' combined arms warfare. Dawn was about to reveal the true scale of the disaster born of Japanese overconfidence. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Japanese soldiers who survived the initial artillery barrage found themselves in a tactical nightmare they had never prepared for. Captain Akamatsu's remaining men were scattered across nearly 2 miles of jungle, cut off from their landing craft, and facing Marine positions that seemed to anticipate their every move. The convenient assumptions that guided Japanese planning, that Americans fought predictably, that their fire support took time to coordinate, that darkness would provide cover, shattered against the reality of modern Marine Corps warfare. Sergeant Thomas moved through the pre-dawn darkness with the fluid precision of a veteran who had learned to read the terrain like a map. His squad took positions along a ridge that dominated the approaches to the main Marine perimeter. Their M1919 machine guns were positioned to create interlocking fields of fire over the valley below. When Japanese infiltrators attempted to bypass his position using a stream bed, Thomas directed accurate bursts that forced them back into the open, where artillery observers could call in fire missions with deadly accuracy. The Japanese expected to encounter the type of static defense they had previously faced in the Pacific. Isolated strongpoints that could be cut off and overwhelmed by a concentrated assault. Instead, they encountered a defensive system that functioned as a single organism, When one Marine position engaged targets, adjacent units automatically adjusted their fields of fire to prevent enemy retreat. Artillery rained down on pre-designated coordinates within minutes of a request. Communication between units remained constant despite the chaos of night combat. Major Wilson coordinated the Marine response from his command post with the calm efficiency of an officer who had studied every aspect of defensive warfare. His field telephone directly connected him to artillery batteries, mortar sections, and forward observers positioned throughout the perimeter. When reports came in of Japanese movement in Grid Square 174, Wilson already had pre-computed firing data for that location. When observers spotted enemy forces attempting to establish a fire base, pre-planned artillery concentrations crashed down on their positions within 3 minutes. The Japanese found their own tactical doctrine rendered obsolete overnight. Small unit infiltration tactics, which had worked against Chinese forces and early American positions in the Pacific, proved useless against Marines, who had learned to fight as integrated combined arms teams. Every rifle squad was supported by machine guns positioned for mutual support. Every company had direct communication with artillery batteries that could deliver precise fire on targets across the battle zone. Every battalion had pre-registered fire missions covering likely enemy approach routes. Private Carter's machine gun position became the focal point of a Japanese assault when Akamatsu led a desperate charge against what he believed to be an tessellated American strongpoint. The captain had gathered nearly 40 survivors from his scattered landing forces, planning to overwhelm the Marines with numerical superiority and close-quarters combat. But Carter's machine gun was part of a meticulously planned defensive network that included interlocking fields of fire from 3 adjacent positions and direct support from a mortar section located 800 yards to the rear. When the Japanese assault began, Carter held his fire until the attackers were within 50 yards, then opened up with sustained bursts that mowed down the lead elements and forced the survivors to take cover in a depression that had been pre-registered as Target Point 7. Within 30 seconds of Carter's first shot, mortar rounds were raining down on the depression with deadly accuracy. The attack, which was meant to break through American lines, instead resulted in 23 Japanese casualties and the effective destruction of Akamatsu's remaining command structure. This battle demonstrated the revolutionary impact of radio communications on small unit tactics. While Japanese units struggled to maintain contact using signal flags and runners, who easily became targets for Marine snipers, American forces maintained constant communication via SCR-300 radios that directly linked squad leaders to their company commanders. When Thomas reported enemy movement in his sector, supporting units were already adjusting their positions before the Japanese reached their assault points. When artillery observers requested fire missions, batteries responded within minutes, not hours, as such coordination would have required in earlier wars. What? How? Is this about me? Don't you make this mistake in every video? But don't notice it. You're making this mistake that makes your design look visually cheap, and here it is. For years, we've repeatedly said that viewer expectations must be met from the very first seconds. You're making this mistake that makes your design look visually cheap, and here it is. Forget everything you were taught in school. It's a lie. We've all been through it. That very moment when it seems all efforts are in vain, and the results are far from desired. I've been there too, in your shoes. when every project seemed to hit an invisible wall. But I managed to find a way out. And today I will share with you the secrets that will help your design look more premium and professional. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. An introduction that hooks the viewer is just the beginning. The real magic starts when each subsequent video segment seamlessly flows into the next, creating a sense of a single, captivating narrative. The viewer shouldn't realize where one thought ends and another begins. For them, it should be a continuous story where each new turn only intensifies interest. All these blocks and structures exist only for you as the creator, while for the audience, there is simply an engaging journey full of discoveries. Thus, each video segment will contain a hidden hint of what's to come, like an invisible thread leading the viewer from one revelation to the next. This isn't just a collection of tips, but a cohesive system that allows your design to truly shine. For example, if we discuss color palettes, the next segment might smoothly transition to typography, demonstrating how these elements are interconnected and influence overall perception. This approach creates a sense of anticipation, compelling the viewer to stay with you to discover what else you have to share. For instance, in our previous discussion, we touched on the topic of contrast. Today, we'll delve deeper into it, showing how the correct use of contrast can instantly elevate the visual value of your project. And this is just one of many techniques we'll cover. Each section won't just be information, but a piece of a larger puzzle that you'll assemble with us, gradually uncovering all the secrets. Japanese night combat tactics, once successful against less equipped adversaries, transformed into deadly traps for Marines armed with night vision devices and coordinated fire support. Infiltration routes intended to provide stealth instead led into pre-planned kill zones. Assault positions that seemed tactically advantageous were, in fact, within the engagement range of multiple Marine weapon systems. The darkness that was supposed to shield Japanese movement instead concealed Marine defenders who knew every inch of their defensive sector. The 70 FEMA 5mm howitzers of the 12th Marine Division fired over 400 rounds during the 6-hour engagement. Each shell was meticulously aimed at targets identified by forward observers, who maintained visual contact with Japanese units throughout the night. The 90mm coastal guns contributed their devastating impact. Their shells created craters that annihilated entire Japanese squad positions. By Euro 3 hours west, Japanese return fire had dwindled to sporadic rifle shots from scattered survivors who were running low on ammunition and had lost contact with their chain of command. Thomas led his squad in a series of limited counterattacks designed to collapse remaining Japanese positions without exposing his men to unnecessary casualties. His tactical decisions reflected the new Marine Corps doctrine, which emphasized firepower over maneuver, using superior weaponry and communication to annihilate enemy forces rather than simply pushing them off positions. When his squad encountered a Japanese machine gun nest still capable of effective fire, Thomas called in precise artillery concentrations that destroyed the position without requiring a costly frontal assault. The Japanese landing force, numbering nearly 500 men at midnight, was reduced to fewer than 100 combat-effective soldiers by dawn. Those who survived found themselves trapped between the beach, where their landing craft had been destroyed by artillery fire, and Marine positions that formed an impassable barrier to their retreat. The planned rear attack, intended to break American resistance, instead demonstrated the futility of traditional tactics against modern combined arms warfare. As the sun rose over Bougainville, the extent of the Japanese tactical disaster became clear to both sides. Dawn revealed the full scope of the catastrophe that had befallen Japan's 53rd Infantry Regiment. Bodies were strewn across the jungle in a grotesque testament to the lethality of modern American firepower. Captain Akamatsu's corpse was found 50 yards from Private Carter's machine gun position, his sword still clutched in his hand, his final charge having brought him within sight of the Marine lines before precise rifle fire cut him down. The beach where 500 soldiers had landed just 12 hours earlier was now a graveyard of twisted metal and abandoned equipment, the charred husks of landing barges marking the high point of Japanese ambition. Major Wilson walked the battlefield as the morning light filtered through the jungle canopy, surveying the results of what military historians would later call a perfect defensive battle. His Marines had sustained 17 killed and 32 wounded, casualties that were remarkably light given the ferocity of the night's fighting. Japanese losses were catastrophic by any measure. Intelligence officers counted 237 confirmed enemy dead, with bloodstains and drag marks indicating that many more had been killed or wounded, but carried away by their comrades during the chaotic retreat. The tactical lessons learned from this battle were as clear as they were revolutionary. Traditional infantry assault tactics, honed over decades of conflict in China and Southeast Asia, proved utterly inadequate against an adversary equipped with modern communications, coordinated artillery support, and integrated defensive systems. The Japanese had planned their attack based on assumptions that were already obsolete, expecting to encounter the kind of static, poorly coordinated defenses they had faced in earlier Pacific campaigns. Sergeant Thomas oversaw the evacuation of wounded Marines while his squad secured the area around the aid station. His own injuries, shrapnel cuts to his left arm, and a bullet graze on his shoulder had been bandaged by a corpsman who worked with calm efficiency despite the ongoing fight. Thomas refused evacuation, insisting his men needed leadership more than he needed medical attention. His actions during the battle would earn him the Medal of Honor, but the citation would hardly capture the tactical brilliance he displayed in coordinating fire and managing his squad's response to numerous Japanese assaults. The surviving Japanese soldiers found themselves in an untenable tactical situation as daylight exposed their positions to Marine observation. Small groups sought refuge in coral caves and dense jungle, but their isolation was complete. No radio contact with higher command, no possibility of resupply or reinforcement, no viable escape route not covered by American weapons. Lieutenant General Imamura's grand strategy had collapsed into a desperate struggle for individual survival among the scattered remnants of what had once been an elite infantry battalion. Marine patrols began systematic sweeps of the battle area, employing tactics that reflected hard-won experience in Pacific jungle warfare. Instead of advancing in traditional formations that could be mined or channeled into kill zones, they moved in small groups with constant radio contact and immediate access to artillery support. When Japanese survivors opened fire from concealed positions, the Marines responded with overwhelming firepower rather than costly attempts to dislodge them in close quarters combat. M2 50 caliber machine guns, positioned to cover the beach approaches, proved devastatingly effective against Japanese attempts to establish defensive positions in coral outcroppings. The heavy rounds could penetrate cover that offered protection from rifle fire, and the psychological impact of the weapon was immense. Japanese soldiers who had endured artillery barrages and mortar fire often broke and ran when the distinctive sound of the .50 calibers opened fire on their positions. Have you ever felt like you're fighting blindly, wasting precious energy in vain? Do you know that oppressive feeling when every attempt to break through obstacles only results in new, painful losses? What if there was a time-tested method that could fundamentally change the course of any battle, even the most hopeless? A method capable of transforming chaos and uncertainty into deadly surgical precision while minimizing your own risks and multiplying the damage to your opponent. Such a turning point occurred on one of the most decisive nights of the Pacific War. Forget all the heroic myths about reckless frontal assaults and pure self-sacrifice. This time, triumph was achieved not through blind courage, but through cold, flawless calculation and unprecedented coordination. In this video, we will reveal 3 key principles that allowed the American Marines to achieve a crushing victory, and here is the first of them, If you want to discover how this story unfolded and what other tactical secrets secured victory, stay with us and watch this video to the very end. We would be especially grateful for your like and subscription, as it helps us create even more content like this. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We're always curious to know our global audience. Throughout the morning, forward artillery observers, whose skills had been honed by months of arduous training and real combat, called in fire missions with astonishing, almost surgical precision. When Marine reconnaissance patrols encountered organized resistance, they did not engage in costly frontal assaults, but skillfully withdrew to a safe distance, immediately requesting artillery support. The outcome of this deliberate tactic was the methodical and relentless destruction of Japanese defensive positions, allowing the Americans to minimize their own casualties while inflicting maximum possible damage on the enemy. Following the artillery barrages, Private Carter's machine gun team moved forward to support the final mop-up operations. Their reliable M1919 was swiftly repositioned and set up to cover new sectors of fire as the Marines steadily expanded their control over the battle zone. During the night's fighting, Carter had fired over 800 rounds, changing red-hot barrels with almost mechanical precision, despite all the chaos and tension of the engagement. Numerous Japanese bodies scattered around his original position served as silent but eloquent testimony to the lethal effectiveness of automatic weapons when employed competently and skillfully in defensive operations. However, the psychological impact of this encounter extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, profoundly affecting the enemy. Captured or surrendered Japanese soldiers reported complete moral disintegration within their units. Many expressed genuine shock and disbelief at the phenomenal speed and striking accuracy of American fire support. This impeccably coordinated response, which utterly shattered their meticulously planned offensive, shook fundamental perceptions of American combat capability and morale that had, until then, underpinned all Japanese military strategy in the Pacific theater. The Marine Corps doctrine, emphasizing the integrated use of all branches of arms within a unified system, proved its undisputed superiority over outdated traditional infantry tactics in the most decisive and convincing manner. To ensure you don't miss any crucial details of this instructive story, and to learn exactly how this system changed the course of the war, be sure to stay with us and watch the video until the end. We would be especially grateful for your like and subscription, as it's the best support for our channel. And please let us know in the comments which city or country you're watching from. We're very interested to know where our viewers are located. The Japanese landing force was annihilated not by overwhelming numerical superiority or outstanding individual heroism, but by the systematic and comprehensive application of firepower, flawless communication, and refined tactical coordination. Every component of the marine defensive system worked exactly as intended, from the initial detection and tracking of enemy forces to the final elimination of scattered remnants. By noon on November 8th, organized Japanese resistance had completely ceased. The few survivors still in the battle area were either lone soldiers or small groups, stripped of weapons, equipment, and most importantly, command. Marine patrols continued to sweep the area throughout the day, but the battle was effectively over. Lieutenant General Imamura's attempt to trap the American beachhead in a pincer movement resulted in the complete destruction of almost an entire battalion of his elite troops. Major Wilson, in drafting his after-action report, felt a deep sense of satisfaction, though it was tempered by the realization that many more such battles awaited American forces as they pushed deeper into Japanese territory. The tactical innovations brilliantly demonstrated on Bougainville subsequently became standard doctrine for marine operations throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. The night, which the Japanese command intended to be the beginning of an American defeat, instead clearly highlighted the overwhelming superiority of modern combined arms warfare over archaic traditional infantry tactics. The methodical mop-up and elimination of surviving Japanese soldiers continued through November 9th and 10th, a grim but necessary process that vividly demonstrated both the exceptional thoroughness of marine operations and the utter hopelessness of the enemy situation. M1917 light tanks from the 3rd Tank Battalion joined the final sweeps, their 37mm guns and machine guns providing devastating firepower against Japanese positions that might have been missed during the night's fighting. The tanks navigated the dense jungle with surprising maneuverability for such vehicles. Their crews, well-trained and extensively experienced in close support tactics for infantry operations in complex, rugged terrain. Sergeant Thomas led his squad in the systematic clearing of coral caves where Japanese soldiers had sought refuge. These natural fortifications offered excellent protection from small arms fire and artillery shrapnel, but they became deadly traps when Marines employed flamethrowers and powerful explosive charges to eliminate entrenched opponents. Thomas coordinated closely with combat engineers who placed shaped charges at cave entrances, collapsing tunnels, and sealing those inside. This work was fraught with immense risk and exhausting physical demands, requiring extremely meticulous coordination to prevent friendly fire incidents, as numerous units operated in close proximity to each other. Aircraft from the 7th Fighter Squadron provided continuous close air support throughout the final phase of the operation. Pilots flying Corsair fighters possessed extensive experience in high-precision targeting, which was essential for jungle warfare. Their aircraft carried 500-pound bombs and rockets, which proved devastatingly effective against Japanese positions that remained hidden from ground observation. When Marine patrols marked targets with colored smoke grenades, aircraft could drop ordnance with an accuracy of up to 50 yards from their own troop positions, a level of precision that would have been utterly inconceivable in earlier stages of the war. Major Wilson established his forward command post at a captured Japanese position, where he meticulously examined captured equipment and documents. These findings revealed the true scale of the enemy's planning for this failed operation. Maps contained detailed intelligence on the location of Marine positions, their communication networks, and supply routes. Equipment inventories indicated that the landing force was outfitted for prolonged operations, carrying ammunition and supplies sufficient for a week-long campaign. The Japanese were evidently supremely confident in the success of their rear attack, planning to establish a permanent blocking position that would paralyze American operations on Bougainville. This unexpected influx of intelligence provided invaluable insights into Japanese tactical doctrine and planning methods. Documents recovered from Captain Akamatsu's command group confirmed that enemy commanders had severely underestimated American defensive capabilities. They expected to encounter the same isolated strong points that characterized earlier Pacific battles. Japanese planning proceeded on the assumption that Marine artillery would be slow to react and unable to provide accurate fire at night, and that American units would be incapable of coordinating effective counterattacks in the dark. This fatal miscalculation of the enemy cost them an entire battalion and altered the course of the war on this front. Have you ever felt trapped in a hopeless situation, surrounded by uncertainty, where every step harbors a threat? Many of us face moments when it seems everything is going wrong and no way out is visible. It is in such moments that stories like the one that unfolded on Bougainville gain special value. Forget everything you've been told about heroic individual feats changing the tide of battle. Today, we will reveal the true formula for victory that revolutionized warfare and showed how a systemic approach surpasses even the most desperate attacks. Prepare to learn how American Marines turned chaos into triumph, and why their experience is relevant even today. During those ominous nights, when darkness concealed every threat, Private Carter, along with his machine gun team, participated in the concluding mop-up operations. Under the cover of their fire, other Marines cautiously advanced through areas where Japanese resistance might still persist. The psychological strain of the prolonged battle affected both American and enemy soldiers. However, the unwavering discipline of the Marine Corps and superior logistics allowed them to maintain combat effectiveness, while the surviving Japanese struggled with hunger, exhaustion, and complete isolation from their command. Stay with us and watch until the end, for what you learn next will change your understanding of warfare. We would be especially grateful for your like and subscription, and of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. The few Japanese soldiers captured during these final operations provided valuable intelligence regarding enemy morale and tactical effectiveness. Most reported that their units had lost all cohesion within the first hours of the engagement. Breakdown in communication and heavy officer casualties made coordinated resistance utterly impossible. Many expressed surprise at the speed and accuracy of American artillery support, as they had been indoctrinated to believe that Marine firepower was inferior to Japanese standards. Marine casualties during the concluding mop-up operations were surprisingly light, only 3 killed and 8 wounded over the 2-day period. This disparity reflected both the effectiveness of American tactics and the complete collapse of organized Japanese resistance. Surviving enemy soldiers were scattered, poorly equipped, and leaderless, while Marine units maintained full combat effectiveness due to continuous resupply and reinforcement from the main beachhead. The final count of confirmed Japanese casualties reached 377, with estimates placing total losses closer to 400 when accounting for those killed or wounded and carried away by surviving comrades. The landing force, numbering nearly 500 men at the start of the operation, was effectively annihilated. Fewer than 20 prisoners taken, and perhaps around 50 survivors, who managed to escape through the jungle to link up with other Japanese units. Thomas received word of his Medal of Honor recommendation as his squad fortified defensive positions around the cleared battle zone. The citation specifically noted his leadership under fire and his role in coordinating the counterattacks that broke Japanese resistance. However, Thomas's comrades understood that his actions symbolized something greater: the transformation of American military doctrine from individual heroism to the systematic application of superior firepower and coordination. The strategic implications of this engagement extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation on Bougainville. Japanese commanders across the Pacific theater were forced to reevaluate their assumptions about American military capabilities and combat effectiveness. The coordinated defensive response that crushed the 53rd Infantry Battalion demonstrated that Marine units could not be overwhelmed by traditional infiltration tactics and surprise assaults. Wilson compiled detailed after-action reports that influenced Marine Corps doctrine for the remainder of the Pacific War. His analysis emphasized the critical importance of integrated fire support, reliable communication, and meticulous preparation of defensive positions. The methods proven successful on Bougainville were refined and applied in subsequent operations, contributing to a series of crushing defeats that ultimately forced Japan to surrender. The battlefield itself was transformed into a training area where new Marine recruits could study the effectiveness of proper defensive tactics. The positions where Thomas led his counterattacks became benchmarks for small unit leadership training. The coral caves where Japanese soldiers made their last stands were used to demonstrate the correct application of flamethrowers and explosive charges in close quarters combat. As November 10th drew to a close, the last organized Japanese resistance in the combat zone was eliminated. What was intended as a rear attack to draw American forces into a devastating pincer movement instead became a textbook demonstration of modern combined arms warfare's superiority over traditional infantry tactics. Lieutenant General Imamura's strategy not only failed completely, but also cost him nearly an entire battalion of experienced troops, a loss felt throughout all subsequent operations. The night, which began with Japanese confidence in their tactical superiority, concluded with a full vindication of American military doctrine and the complete annihilation of enemy forces that dared to challenge the Marine Corps' defensive positions. The morning of November 11th brought an unusual quiet to the Bougainville beachhead, as Marine units consolidated their positions and processed the lessons learned from the crushing Japanese defeat. Major Wilson stood on the ridge where Sergeant Thomas had performed his heroic feat, surveying a battlefield transformed from dense jungle into a moonscape of shell craters and destroyed vegetation. The tactical implications of what transpired here would influence military doctrine for years to come, but the immediate human cost demanded recognition and reflection. Graves' registration teams worked methodically across the battlefield, identifying and processing American casualties with dignity and respect, honoring their sacrifice. Each of the 17 Marines killed in action was photographed and documented before being interred in a temporary cemetery established near the beachhead. Their names would be communicated to their next of kin with letters explaining that they died defending American positions against an overwhelming enemy assault. While the full details of their tactical victory remained classified for several months, Thomas oversaw the construction of defensive fortifications designed to prevent any repeat of Japanese infiltration attempts. His squad learned valuable lessons about machine gun placement for maximum effectiveness in jungle environments, methods that would be incorporated into Marine Corps training manuals and disseminated to units throughout the Pacific Theater. The positions where his men fought so effectively were meticulously mapped and analyzed by intelligence officers seeking to understand why American defensive doctrine had proven so superior to Japanese offensive tactics. Have you ever wondered why seemingly reliable old methods sometimes lead to catastrophic results? Imagine an elite unit, numerically superior to its enemy, suddenly finding itself completely annihilated in a single night. How is this possible? This isn't just a story of military defeat. It's a lesson in how outdated perceptions can lead to collapse, even when all the cards seem to be in your favor. Today, we'll delve into a moment when traditional tactics clashed with a reality that changed the course of history, and why these lessons are still relevant today. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription, and of course, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The psychological imprint of this encounter permeated both military hierarchies, influencing strategy until the very end of the Pacific War. Japanese commanders, receiving reports of the catastrophe, struggled to comprehend how an entire elite infantry battalion could be virtually wiped out in a single night by defensive forces outnumbered by the attacking troops. The coordinated firepower and tactical flexibility demonstrated by the Marine units challenged foundational assumptions about the effectiveness of American armed forces that Japanese command had held since Pearl Harbor. This was not just a battle. It was a re-evaluation of warfare. At the heart of this deadly defense stood Private Carter, whose machine gun was credited with over 60 confirmed enemy casualties, making his position one of the most lethal single firing points in the entire engagement. Military historians would later meticulously study the exact placement of his weapon and the fields of fire he controlled, recognizing that his tactical position represented a perfect application of automatic weapons in defensive operations. The crossfire he coordinated with adjacent positions became a textbook example of how properly placed machine guns could dominate terrain and channel enemy movement into predetermined kill zones. But how could the enemy have so miscalculated? Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription, and of course let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Intelligence analysis from captured Japanese documents revealed the full depth of the enemy's miscalculation that led to this disaster. Planning documents clearly showed that Japanese commanders expected to encounter static defensive positions, manned by troops with limited night fighting capabilities and minimal artillery support. Their tactical doctrine assumed that American units would require several hours to coordinate counterattacks, and that individual Marine positions could be overwhelmed by concentrated assault before supporting firepower could be brought to bear. The reality they faced proved devastatingly different from their expectations. What exactly was so different? Marine Corps defensive doctrine, by contrast, emphasized mobile defense with integrated fire support, capable of responding to threats within minutes, not hours. Communication systems linking every rifle squad to battalion-level fire support meant that isolated Japanese assault groups found themselves under accurate artillery fire almost immediately upon detection. Night vision devices and coordinated illumination allowed Marines to engage targets that believed themselves concealed by darkness. These innovations not only saved lives, but shaped future strategies. Wilson was ordered to prepare detailed after-action reports for dissemination to Marine units across the Pacific, with a specific focus on the tactical innovations that proved most effective against Japanese night infiltration methods. His analysis influenced defensive doctrine at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and other critical battles where American forces faced similar infiltration attempts. The methods pioneered during the Bougainville engagement saved thousands of American lives in subsequent operations. But the Japanese losses were not only tactical. The strategic implications of Lieutenant General Imamura's failed operation extended beyond the immediate tactical situation, impacting Japanese planning throughout the theater. The loss of nearly an entire battalion of experienced troops represented a significant reduction in Japanese combat power on Bougainville. But the psychological impact was even more devastating. Word of the catastrophe spread quickly among Japanese units, undermining confidence in traditional tactics and command decisions. Even in such conditions, humanity emerged on the battlefield. Medical personnel attended to the wounded on both sides with professional competence, reflecting the highest standards of military medicine. American casualties were immediately evacuated to field hospitals, equipped with the latest surgical techniques and pharmaceuticals. Japanese wounded who could be saved were provided medical care, often superior to what their own forces could provide, although many succumbed to injuries that would have been treatable with quicker intervention. In these deadly conditions, exceptional heroism also emerged. Thomas was formally recommended for the Medal of Honor by his battalion commander, who cited his exceptional leadership under fire and his role in coordinating the defensive actions that broke the Japanese resistance. The recommendation included detailed testimonies from Marines who fought alongside him, describing how his calm presence and tactical expertise were critical to the successful defense. The medal would be awarded 6 months later in a ceremony that celebrated not only individual heroism, but also the collective excellence of Marine Corps training and doctrine. These figures only confirmed the scale of the victory. The final casualty count confirmed the completeness of the American tactical victory on a scale that would have been unthinkable at the outset of the Pacific War. 377 confirmed Japanese soldier deaths against 17 American casualties, represented an exchange ratio demonstrating the overwhelming superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry assault tactics. This disparity reflected not only superior weaponry and equipment, but also fundamental differences in tactical doctrine training methods, and operational coordination. How did this happen at the planning stage? A reconstruction of Japanese planning revealed that enemy commanders expected their rear attack to achieve tactical surprise and cause panic among the Marines, leading to a collapse of American resistance and the recapture of key positions around the beachhead. Instead, their assault provoked a perfectly coordinated defensive response that systematically destroyed their forces while inflicting minimal casualties on the defenders. This battle set a precedent, demonstrating how superior doctrine and training could overcome numerical superiority and tactical surprise. The lessons learned at Bougainville would influence American military operations for decades after World War II, establishing principles of integrated fire support and coordinated defense that became fundamental elements of modern warfare. The night when Japanese commanders thought they had trapped the Marine forces instead became the moment when traditional infantry tactics met their obsolescence in the face of an emerging combined arms doctrine that would dominate battlefields for generations to come. This is a story not only of victory, but of how the future always arrives, demanding the abandonment of old paradigms.